I am 82 years old, and I am watching the world sleepwalk. I am watching you, rushing through your days, staring at your screens, completely blind to the reality of what is actually happening. I am about to tell you a truth that will probably make you uncomfortable. Because everything you think you know about building a good life is a beautifully packaged lie. The people you look up to, your professors, your corporate mentors, society at large, they are either actively deceiving you or they are just as lost as you are. I know this because for the first 55 years of my life, I bought into the exact same illusions you are defending right now. I thought I had conquered the world. I was a lead architect for one of the most ruthless, prestigious commercial real estate firms in Chicago. I had the corner office with the mahogany desk, the custom-tailored Italian suits, the sprawling estate in Lake Forest, and the quiet envy of every man in my country club. I thought that was the summit. I thought that was the point of breathing. But at 55, something terrifying and completely unexpected shattered that entire illusion. And the agonizing, beautiful truths I have been forced to learn in the 27 years since that day have fundamentally rewired how I understand human existence and the fleeting vapor we call time. Listen to me. I am not speaking into this microphone to sound like some wise sage on a mountaintop. I am doing this because my shadow is getting very long. The sun is setting on my time here. And there are critical things you need to absorb before the clock runs out. And this is not for my ego. This is entirely for your survival. It was November 14th, 1998. I remember the exact bite and chill of the wind coming off Lake Michigan, whipping violently against my heavy cashmere overcoat. I was standing on a temporary wooden scaffolding, 42 stories above the frozen, crawling traffic of the city. We were reviewing the final structural blueprints for a monolithic glass tower I had designed, a building I arrogantly thought would be my immortal legacy. I remember the smell of the cold steel, the sharp scent of the ozone, and the loud flapping sound of the blue paper in my hands. Suddenly, the sound of the wind just faded away. A heavy, suffocating static filled my ears. The left side of my face went completely numb, as if someone had injected it with ice water. I dropped the blueprints. I literally watched the heavy blue paper flutter down, swirling into the gray abyss of the Chicago streets. And then everything went black. I didn't have a heart attack in a cozy boardroom. I suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke on a freezing metal ledge. The next thing I remember is the harsh, humming sound of fluorescent lights and the sterile chemical smell of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I couldn't move the entire left side of my body. My wife, Sarah, was sitting in a plastic chair in the corner of the room, her hands trembling as she held a cold cup of coffee, her face pale and exhausted. The neurologist stood over my bed, adjusting his glasses, and told me I was incredibly lucky. I had just stared directly into the black void of my own mortality, and they called it a stroke of luck. But as the days dragged on, as I lay staring at the water stains on the ceiling tiles, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the monitors, I realized that cold, clinical doctor was absolutely right. Because in that sterile prison, with my ambition violently stripped away, and nothing left to do but think, a horrifying realization washed over me. I had been living my entire adult existence on absolute autopilot. I was breathing, my heart was pumping, but I wasn't actually alive. I was just a highly efficient machine, going through the motions, checking off corporate boxes, desperately trying to meet the moving targets of what other people defined as success. Let me ask you something, and I want you to feel the weight of this question in your chest. If my brain had completely bled out on that scaffolding, and if the ambulance had been 10 minutes slower, what would I have actually left behind? A towering piece of concrete and glass that some other firm would eventually buy and rebrand, a massive retirement portfolio, a collection of architectural awards gathering dust in a glass cabinet, achievements that absolutely no one on this earth would remember or care about 5 years after my funeral. Let me tear down the most dangerous lie you are whispering to yourself every single morning. The lie that says, I have time. You tell yourself, I will deal with that later, when I am older. When the dust settles, then I will finally live the life I actually crave. I look at the young people today, men and women in their 20s, 30s, even their 40s. And it breaks my heart because you are all repeating the same tragic script. You convince yourself, when I finally hit 6 figures, then I will feel secure and happy. When I make senior partner, then the anxiety will stop and I can relax. When the kids are finally out of college, then Sarah and I will take that trip to Florence. When I retire, then I will pick up the guitar again. Then I will do what makes my soul sing. Let me save you half a century of bitter, quiet weeping into your pillow. That magical day, it never arrives. Do you want to know why? Because the goalposts are attached to a moving train. You bleed and sweat to get that massive promotion. And the very next morning, you realize you are at the bottom of a brand new, steeper ladder. And now you need the next promotion just to feel worthy. You hit your financial target, and suddenly your lifestyle inflates. Your neighbors buy a boat, and suddenly you need more money just to breathe. You spend your entire youth running on a treadmill, staring at a screen, chasing a digital carrot that is always just 1 inch out of reach. And before you can even blink, before you can comprehend what has happened, you're 70 or 80 years old, staring at wrinkled hands, wondering where the hell the fire of your youth went. I did exactly this. I spent 30 agonizing years aggressively climbing a corporate ladder, missing dinners, losing sleep, fighting for dominance, only to finally reach the very top and realize, with a sickening drop in my stomach, that my ladder was leaning against a completely wrong wall. And here's the brutal physics of life. You cannot climb back down and ask the universe for a reset. Time only marches in one ruthless direction. Here is a truth that the business schools and the motivational speakers refuse to tell you. Success, as society defines it, is a remarkably terrible goal. I am telling you this as a man who conquered the skyline, who achieved every single metric of prestige I wrote down on a notepad when I was 22. I built the landmarks. I bought the sprawling estate. I walked into rooms and watched men quiet down out of respect. And do you know what the grand secret is? None of it. Absolutely none of it. Warm my bones at night. You bleed for a goal. You finally capture it. And for about 48 hours, you feel like you are floating on adrenaline. And then, inevitably, the chemical rush fades away. The void returns. You drop right back to your baseline of anxiety. And now, you need a bigger project, a more expensive car, a louder round of applause just to feel anything at all. It is a psychological hamster wheel painted in gold. I had a dear colleague, Marcus, a brilliant structural engineer, He passed away 4 years ago at the age of 66. Marcus worked 80-hour weeks his entire adult life, built a massive consulting firm from scratch, slept in his office, never took his wife on a real vacation, never learned how to just sit still. He always used to tap my shoulder and say, "Next year, old man, next year I'm going to sell my shares and move to a cabin in Montana." Well, next year finally arrived, and it brought a massive coronary occlusion. I stood in the rain at his funeral. I listened to his 35-year-old daughter deliver the eulogy. She stood at the podium, looked at the mahogany casket, and said, "My father was a highly successful engineer, but to be honest, I barely knew the man." Is that it? Is that the legacy you are burning your daylight for? Listen to me very carefully. When you reach the twilight of your life, when you are lying in the quiet dark, your deepest, most agonizing regrets will not be about the mistakes you made or the deals you lost. Your soul will not care about a failed negotiation in 2002. Your regrets will be entirely about the things you did not have the courage to do at all. I don't lie awake at 3 a.m. sweating over a botched architectural contract from the 80s. Those memories are dust. Do you want to know what actually keeps an old man staring at the ceiling? It is the smell of a damp Tuesday evening in 1986. My daughter, Emily, she was just 8 years old. She was standing in the doorway of my home office, wearing these slightly too large yellow pajamas, holding a worn-out copy of a fairy tale book. She asked me to read just one chapter. I remember the warmth in her eyes, the absolute trust. And I remember looking at my watch, looking at the blueprints for a corporate plaza, and telling her, "Not tonight, sweetie. Daddy has a massive deadline tomorrow." I watched her little shoulders drop. I watched her slowly close the heavy oak door. I let that moment slip away into the dark, because I convinced myself that the concrete plaza was somehow more important than the only childhood my daughter would ever have. Those are the ghosts that eat at you in the night. The quiet Sunday mornings you traded for conference calls, and the road trip through the Rockies you never took with your best friend because the timing wasn't perfect. The profound vulnerability, the words of love you swallowed and kept locked in your throat because you were too proud or too afraid. You look at the people around you, your aging mother, your stubborn father, your siblings, the friends who know your history. You look at them and your brain tricks you into believing you have an infinite reservoir of tomorrows to make things right. You do not. One random Tuesday, the reservoir will violently run dry. My older brother, Thomas, died when I was 48. We had a bitter, stupid argument over an inheritance, a deeply complicated relationship. And we stopped speaking for 4 years. I always told myself, I'll drive up to Wisconsin next spring. I'll buy him a beer. We will figure it out when my schedule clears up. We never got that spring. A drunk driver crossed the center line on Interstate 94, and Thomas was gone before the ambulance even turned on its sirens. Do you have any idea how heavy that realization is? My most suffocating regret, the one that makes my chest physically ache, is all the random Saturday afternoons I didn't just pick up the damn telephone. All the times I was too exhausted from building someone else's empire to drive 2 hours to share a cheap pizza with my own flesh and blood. All the irreplaceable microscopic moments of connection that I casually threw into the incinerator of my career. There will not always be more time. The stroke broke me. It took me 7 months of humiliating physical therapy just to learn how to tie my own leather shoes again. But as the feeling slowly returned to my left hand, I made a brutal, terrifying pivot. I walked into the firm, leaning heavily on a wooden cane, and I handed in my resignation. I completely stepped back from the vanity projects. I started aggressively saying no, turning my back on the endless social obligations and corporate dinners that drained my spirit. And for the first time in my life, I started whispering yes to the terrifying, beautiful things I had postponed for decades in these last 27 years. Walking with a limp, operating on a fraction of the energy I once had. I have learned more about the profound poetry of human existence than I did in over half a century of relentless ambition. The ultimate secret, the grand meaning of it all, is embarrassingly wonderfully simple. It is unfiltered time with the people who anchor your soul. It is engaging in labor that actually feels meaningful to your specific heart, not just profitable to your wallet. It is about accumulating breathtaking experience, feeling the cold ocean water on your bare feet instead of hoarding useless, depreciating objects in a giant house. It is about radically being present in the room you are currently sitting in. I know exactly what you are thinking. You are rolling your eyes right now. If I was sitting in your chair, a young, hungry architect, I would have laughed and said, "That is very poetic, old man. But the mortgage needs to be paid. The electricity isn't free." And you are entirely correct. I am not sitting here telling you to burn your resume, abandon your responsibilities, and go live in a tent in the woods. I am begging you, pleading with you to stop sacrificing the core of your humanity for things that absolutely do not matter. Do not trade your daughter's laughter for an extra zero in a bank account that you cannot take into the dirt with you. I want to ask you a question, and I demand that you answer it with absolute brutal honesty. If your heart stopped beating tomorrow afternoon, if the screen went entirely black, would you be genuinely satisfied with the exact life you have experienced up to this very second? I'm not asking if your coworkers would be impressed by the length of your resume. I am not asking if you hit your quarterly sales targets. I am asking, would your soul be satisfied? If the honest answer is a quiet, terrifying no, then what in God's name are you waiting for? What mundane, repetitive task are you doing with your Tuesday that is so monumentally important that you are willing to gamble your one singular vanishing life on it? I am 82 years old. Despite the stroke, I have been remarkably blessed with relative stability in my twilight years. But every single morning when I hear the birds outside my window, when I feel the stiffness in my joints, I am acutely aware that I am operating on strictly borrowed time. The reality is, we all are. But the tragedy of youth is the absolute delusion of invincibility. You walk around with a shield of arrogance, believing the horizon goes on forever. It does not. I watch my grandchildren now. I have 4 of them. Brilliant, beautiful kids navigating their 20s. And when I sit quietly in the corner of the room and just observe them, I see the exact same destructive software running in their minds that ruined my middle age. I watch them vibrating with stress, drowning in anxiety, desperately chasing digital validation and material markers that will never, ever fill the hole in their chest. They are making the exact same structural errors I made. And I try to sit them down. I pour them a cup of tea. I try to hand them the map to the minefield. But you know what? They just nod politely and check their phones. They don't truly hear me. Not because they are arrogant or cruel, but because they literally cannot process the warning. They are standing in the dead center of a hurricane of societal pressure right now. They cannot see the grim reality of the patterns yet. They suffer from the ultimate human delusion. They truly believe their specific situation is completely unique, and that the ancient, unforgiving laws of time and consequence do not apply to them. That is exactly why I'm sitting in front of this lens today. Because maybe, just by some miracle of the algorithm, if enough souls stumble across this raw confession, someone's armor will crack. Maybe someone driving to a job they hate will finally listen. Maybe someone will pull their car over to the side of the road. Take a deep breath and make a radically different choice today. Maybe someone will actually dodge the suffocating regrets that haunt the nightmares of old men like me. Look at your hands. You are actively getting closer to the grave. It is the one biological truth we are terrified to whisper. Your supply of sand is aggressively running out, and neither do the people who make your life worth living. Think about your mother, your father. If you are lucky enough to still have them walking this earth, they are fading a little bit more every single time the sun rises one day. And I promise you it will happen significantly faster than your brain is prepared for. Their voice will only exist in your memory. Your childhood friends, your tired spouse, the little children running through your hallway. Not a single one of these miraculous connections is guaranteed a tomorrow. So, I am asking you to make a definitive choice right now. What are you going to do? Are you going to keep ignoring the universe? Are you going to keep postponing that crucial, vulnerable phone call to your brother? Are you going to keep delaying that road trip? Keeping the brochure folded in your drawer while you tell yourself next summer? Or are you finally going to splash cold water on your face, wake up to the brutal reality of this morning, and start acting like your existence is wildly, dangerously limited? Because it absolutely is. If by some magic I could rip a hole in the fabric of time, if I could walk into that architectural firm in 1904 and grab my 30-year-old self by the lapels of his suit, here is exactly what I would scream in his face. Stop shredding your soul to impress strangers who will not even attend your funeral. Stop trading your cardiovascular health and your peace of mind for a slightly larger cubicle. Stop pushing joy and passion and stillness into a fictional box labeled someday. Stop waiting for some invisible authority figure to grant you permission to actually live your own damn life. Pick up the heavy phone and call your aging parents just to hear them breathe. Book the ridiculous overpriced flight to the mountains you have been dreaming about since you were a teenager. Start leaning into the chaotic, terrifying experiences that make the hairs on your arms stand up. Find the absolute courage to look people in the eye and say no to the vampires that drain your energy. And find the grace to say an overwhelming yes to the quiet moments that fill your cup. But the most critical piece of the puzzle, the hinge upon which your entire fate swings, is that you must initiate this change now. Not after the Q3 earnings report, not after you finally finish renovating the kitchen, not next January when you swear you will reinvent yourself, not when the bank account hits a magic number. Now, because I swear to you on everything holy, the perfectly aligned, frictionless time to start living will never materialize. Human existence is entirely designed to be messy, overwhelmingly complicated, and constantly armed with a million perfectly logical excuses to just wait one more day. But if you surrender to that waiting, you will blink, your hair will turn gray, and you will wake up in a hospital bed realizing you successfully waited your entire beautiful life away. I am 82. If the universe is feeling incredibly generous, I might have 5 years left to watch the snow fall, maybe 10 if medical science pulls off a miracle, most likely significantly less. And you know what? I am completely deeply at peace with the darkness approaching, because these last 27 years, post-stroke, walking with the cane, have been the most vibrant, saturated, profoundly rich chapters of my entire existence. Not because I managed to accumulate more wealth, but because I finally ripped the blinders off and started living with fierce, unapologetic intention, savoring the taste of my morning coffee, aggressively prioritizing the human heartbeat over the corporate spreadsheet. I finally stood in the ruins of Rome, something I told my wife I would do for 30 years. I sat on the floor and built awful, crooked birdhouses with my granddaughter. I picked up watercolor painting, and I am terrible at it. And it brings me endless joy. I looked the men who wronged me in the eye and offered complete forgiveness, releasing decades of toxic venom from my chest. I have looked at Sarah and my daughter and my friends and said, I love you so many times I have completely lost count. I sit here before you, an old man with failing kidneys and a damaged brain. And I am infinitely happier with a few grains of sand left in my hourglass than I was at 35 when I arrogantly believed I owned the entire beach. That is the grand, beautiful irony of mortality. The exact second you truly internalize that the ride is ending, you finally unbuckle your seatbelt and start enjoying the view. You violently stop squandering your daylight. You stop hoarding your joy like a miser. You stop waiting for the stars to align. And you start actively building the right time with your own two hands. So, the crossroads is entirely yours right now, today, in this exact breath. You can close this video. You can go back to sleep. You can keep running on the golden hamster wheel, chasing the hollow applause, delaying your happiness, convincing your heavy heart that you will make time for the real things next year. Or you can violently wake up. You can stare into the mirror and accept that the ice is melting faster than you can comprehend. And the beautiful, messy, authentic life you are desperately waiting to experience has to begin this afternoon. I cannot reach through this lens and force your hand, but I can promise you, from the bottom of my scarred heart, you do not want to reach your 80s, looking back at a museum of missed chances, praying for a time machine that doesn't exist. Do not waste half a century wandering in the dark just to figure this out. Take my scars. Learn from my profound failures. Live fiercely on purpose. Guard what actually matters with your life. Stop waiting for the elusive someday. Someday is right now. It always was. It's the only thing you actually possess. If anything I have said has cracked your armor today, send this to someone you love. Leave a mark in the comments. Tell the universe exactly what you are going to change before the sun goes down. Subscribe to this channel because my time is remarkably short. but I still have a few heavy truths left to empty from my pockets before I go. The pendulum is swinging. The clock is ticking in your chest. What exactly are you going to do with your remaining beats?